Strong words from Prime Minister Modi. But the big question, how will this Modi doctrine now rein in Pakistan-based terror? Have we now drawn a new red line with our neighbor, our hostile neighbor? That's the question that Narendra Modi's tough words will raise. Joining me now is Raj Chengappa, editorial director at India Today, joins me, veteran of covering many India-Pakistan stories. I'm also joined by another veteran, Dr. Sanjay Baru, veteran journalist and someone who was part of Manmohan Singh's Prime Minister's office, and Geeta Mohan, our diplomatic affairs editor, who I'm going to first. Geeta, how is this speech being now seen? The strong words by the Prime Minister, what kind of reactions are we getting at the moment, particularly from all the diplomats and others you've been speaking to?
Well, too early for reactions to come in, Rajdeep. We'll start rolling out reactions in just a while from now. But yes, it just comes after the big announcement by US President Donald Trump. Having said that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, for the first time, made the entire policy official. For the past 2 days, we've been saying on the basis of sources that the government has shifted its stance and its policy, saying that act of terror will now be considered as an act of war. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spelled that out in no uncertain words. So that's very important. It's not just a shift, Rajdeep, it's also a message to the world and to those who were saying and thinking that there was a lot of pressure that was being mounted on India, that if there's an act of terror, there is going to be a military response. The world can think what they want to, the world can say what they want to, but please do not call New Delhi to say de-escalate. If they want de-escalation, it should happen from the perpetrators. And here he said the Akas, the ones behind the terror attacks, which he meant was the Pakistani state and the establishment. So that's a clear message.
The University of Terror. The University of Terror, as he's called it, they are the ones who have, and he widened its scope, Raj Chengappa, not just to include what happened to India, but across the world, that this is a country which for decades now has been sponsoring terror. How do you interpret that message? Do we now have a new strategic doctrine in place which says enough of diplomatic restraint? We will now treat every terror attack as an act of war. Operation Sindoor is the new normal.
Well, I think let's call it more on the red lines, right? Strategic doctrines, you could term it in various other ways. And if you look at that, first is that the quantum of punishment is a dramatic improvement. I mean, escalation over what happened in Balakot. You are hitting one camp and mainly foot soldiers. Here you're now virtually cutting the head of the snake off, right? You're hitting the headquarters of Lashkar-e-Taiba as well as Jaish-e-Mohammed. And the second big message is, so you're going after the leaders. You are not, just trying to make a hit at the ground level. The second, I think, big thing is geography is not a constraint. There is no place to hide. We will hit you wherever you are. And that's the big message that's there. And the third is a big message for Pakistan, that we're willing to get into Punjab, which is your heartland, close to the capital. We'll strike you where it hurts you the most. We are unafraid of your nuclear blackmail that you thought you'd always get away with. And the other aspect is that, when it came to toughness in terms of what ahead, he was very clear that there will be no, terror. I mean, no talks if there's terror still. In terms of trade also, we're going to cut off. And he also mentioned blood and water will not mix, which means that the Indus water is going to be an issue as we look ahead. And very, very interestingly, also mentioned POK. There was one aspect of it, which I think Pakistan should take note of, that he talked of the fact that Pakistan themselves will have to come to terms and cleanse themselves. So there is an opening in terms of the development side that Pakistan must now move in a different direction. And that's very valid because I feel if you have to really get away from the trap that they're in, Pakistan must start focusing on development. There are a virtual basket case that is
So there's a very, very tough message to Pakistan in the Prime Minister's message, not just limited to non-state actors, as the terrorists were called, but to the Pakistani army state as well. That's the distinction. Until now, Pakistan has tried to make a distinction between non-state actors, i.e. the terrorist groups, and the state of Pakistan. The Prime Minister is not making that distinction anymore. I want to come to you, Dr. Sanjay Baru. Are we seeing, therefore, a radical departure from how previous governments dealt with terror? Now the Prime Minister is claiming Operation Sindoor is the new normal. You hit us, we will come right into your heartland and strike you undeterred by nuclear blackmail.
Well, I mean, Rajdeep, first of all, we have still not found out who these terrorists were in Pahalgam who came and killed 26 Indians. They are still at large. We don't know who exactly they are, where did they come. I think I understand entirely the Prime Minister's approach, the government's approach under the circumstances. But I think going forward, it's very important for us to be careful that we do not destabilize the region by reacting in this manner to every terror attack. I mean, we are then giving the initiative to random terrorists. After all, how many people are involved in Pahalgam? 5, 6? I mean, you can get a group of terrorists staging a terror attack and then put two nations at war. So I'm not convinced that this is a doctrine that can be sustained. You can have another terror attack day after tomorrow, and then again we are back at war. So I think we need a long-term strategy to deal with Pakistan. This has been the argument. I mean, this has been the view of Prime Minister Vajpayee, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in the past, that while terrorism is there under so many governments, from the Narasimha Rao's time, we have seen terrorism. But what is a long-term solution? Threatening Pakistan, I understand, under the circumstances. Warning Pakistan that will go after you if you do it again is entirely understandable. But if we are subject to random attacks by elements that we cannot identify, after all, we have not yet identified the elements in Pahalgam, then are we exposing our country to continuous destabilization? Is this a wise long-term strategy for India and Pakistan? That's the one question I would like to pose to the government. Second, I think the fact is that the response of the international community for the very first time was fundamentally different from the past. You look at the way in which the world reacted in November 2008 when we had the Mumbai attack, and or even in the Balakot, and this time. I mean, could the International Monetary Fund not have postponed its meeting at least by a week and said that, look, there are hostilities between these two countries, let's meet a week later? They met in the middle of hostilities. That was a message to India. So, and then today, Trump's remarks just before the Prime Minister's address, that he got in and separated the two. I think, these are all questions that the current situation poses, to which we do not have clear answers.
Let me bring in a guest who's joining us from Washington at the moment. I'm joined by Michael Rubin, former Pentagon official, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Rubin. But before that, just to let you know that US President Donald Trump a short while ago spoke, and he too, on India and Pakistan, gave us some breaking news. Trump said he was the one who stopped a nuclear conflict. That was the breaking news that came in a little while ago. Trump said, I told both sides to stop fighting. Trump claims he pressured India and Pakistan for a ceasefire and will do a lot of trade now with both. Just listen to what Donald Trump said, and then I'll get a reaction from my guest in Washington.
On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. And I'm very proud to let you know that the leadership of India and Pakistan was unwavering, powerful, but unwavering in both cases, and having these, they really were, from the standpoint of having the strength and the wisdom and fortitude to fully know and to understand the gravity of the situation. And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And
Michael Rubin, how are we to see what Donald Trump said a while ago? Is America truly playing the role here of an honest deal maker? Or is this Donald Trump simply not following any process when he claims credit for bringing this conflict to at least a pause at the moment?
Well, the thing to understand about Donald Trump is that he also single-handedly won the Cricket World Cup, he landed on the moon, and he invented the internet. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump is prone to exaggeration, and he's also speaking to the American audience. He shouldn't be taken literally. I am absolutely sure, however, that the United States was scrambling behind the scenes to try to pass messages along and to try to derail any escalation that could lead to unrestricted warfare. So I think it's a little bit untoward, it's impolite, it's navel-gazing for Donald Trump to try to claim credit for everything. It does India a disservice and Pakistan a disservice. The last thing is what I would read into Donald Trump's comments is still a troubling deference to moral equivalency between India and Pakistan in terms of who was the aggressor and who was the victim.
That's a great point you made there, Michael. Is that a worry, though, that Donald Trump, and that's a worry here in New Delhi, that here is an American president not making a distinction between the perpetrators of terror, and not just terror against India, but as Prime Minister Modi enunciated, against the world. This is the same country that housed Osama bin Laden. So does Donald Trump need a lesson, in a sense, in South Asian geopolitics when he tries to equate India and Pakistan, the perpetrator of terror, with the victim of terror here? And why is he
Well, I
doing
think,
it?
first of all, we saw that Donald Trump needs a lesson in South Asia when he said that this conflict had been going on for more than 1,000 years across the border. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump doesn't know the details. He's often speaking from the cuff. The good news is, however, he has a strong relation with Prime Minister Modi, and he also has a team which understands the reality of South Asia much more than the president does. And so then the question is, how do you allow the president of the United States to save face while getting spun up to speed on the situation? We have seen, for example, in American reporting that in the more than 100 days which Donald Trump has been in office, he has skipped all but 12 of his presidential daily briefs, the daily CIA briefings about world affairs. Perhaps he really does need an education right now.
And the point that you make also in a tweet I saw, that here is a president who failed to stop Pakistan, the nuclear threat which has been held out from time to time whenever there's been a conflict between India and Pakistan. Today, Prime Minister Modi making it very clear, we will not be deterred by nuclear blackmail. Does Donald Trump recognize the dangers that, dare I call it, a rogue army state in Pakistan holds while it has the nuclear button, and therefore needs to send them a tough message?
Put it this way. He will ultimately understand this. I worry about the damage that could be done before he doesn't. And you know what? His legacy, if he's not careful, is not only going to be the exasperation of the situation in Pakistan, but it's also going to be Pakistan transforming Bangladesh into a twin of state sponsorship of terror. And so, look, every president since George H.W. Bush had his foreign policy legacy defined by the crisis which no one saw coming during his campaign. And Donald Trump is no different. He wasn't thinking about India or Pakistan when he was campaigning against Kamala Harris. However, the way he reacts now is really going to be how history judges him. He's dug himself into a bit of a hole, but it's not too late to dig out and recognize the reality. But I would also put some of the onus for educating Donald Trump on Prime Minister Modi. He has a personal relationship. He needs to use it. The historical analogy I would make is when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990. President George H.W. Bush wasn't sure how to respond. And Margaret Thatcher, with whom he had a personal relationship, said, "Don't go wobbly on me now, George." We need a similar moment between Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump.
I'll come back to you in a moment, Michael, because you're making very, very strong and very important points. But Raj Chengappa, this is precisely the problem. Prime Minister Modi has enunciated the Modi doctrine very clearly, that there's a red line that we've drawn in a way with Pakistan-based terror. The world needs to wake up to it. We've just heard the US president once again hyphenating India and Pakistan, saying he wants to do trade with both great nations. Is that, in a sense, part of where India is going to have to navigate this very closely? Yes, every act of terror is a provocation, but how far can you go when dealing with an unstable Pakistani army state? Is that the concern that we still have to have going forward?
Well, the evaluation of the entire Operation Sindoor as well as the Pakistan response, there is a lot of, lack of clarity. Let's still say the fog of war exists as to what really happened. And if you look at the comments that both President Trump and his Deputy Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, talked about, you will see that he talks of a meeting that we are supposed to have, India is supposed to have with Pakistan on neutral grounds and with key issues. Where is the dissonance coming from? Because the Indians denied fully, and the Pakistanis, of course, were quite happy that America is getting involved. So I'm not very clear where this, I did try to find out how did this all emanate. Certainly, Marco, his Secretary of State, and Donald Trump would have played a role in calming things down. We do know that the Secretary of State did go and speak to, or did call General Asim Munir. And what were the circumstances that led it? What we can see is evidence that, one, India had made some decisive strikes. Two, that India had achieved its objectives in the first 30 minutes of the war itself, we would like to call it, when it struck the camps in Muridke and Bawalpur, and therefore, inflicted pain and kept to it. So after that was all escalatory steps that Pakistan was taking. And if you see the final step where India hits the air bases hard, was that a moment of panic for Asim Munir, and therefore he ran to the, as they say, cry uncle.
No, that's what Mr. Modi says. Mr. Modi says Pakistan begged the world to end this conflict.
But let us also be, if you look at it, India had actually right through said we do not want to escalate it beyond the first strike that we did. And Pakistan, after doing what it had to do, was also looking for an exit ramp. But the problem was, I think it had escalated so rapidly to a point that when two nuclear powers clash like this, mistakes of any kind would be disastrous, not just for India and the world. So I don't know where the context is coming from, but certainly, America getting into this picture and Trump, I mean, you always have to take Donald Trump with a pinch of salt.
I think you made a very important point, which Sanjay Baru also made, and I want to press on that, because today we are discussing this Modi doctrine. If I may be, he's not used that word. I'm calling it that when he says Operation Sindoor is the new normal. The worry, of course, is that yes, while we need to send a tough message to Pakistan, it can also result in misadventure. You, Dr. Baru, were part of regimes that spoke of strategic restraint. Now, that did not deter Pakistan. We had 26/11. We've had attacks on our parliament. So Mr. Modi is taking us in a new direction. Now, surely if what happened in the past didn't work, maybe we've got to try the Modi way of teaching Pakistan a lesson.
Yes, I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I mean, that is why there was national unity on this issue. The opposition political parties also supported the government on the action they were taking. So I don't think that the debate is about whether the government was right or wrong in doing what it did. I think the real issues are going forward. If this is the approach that after every terror attack, we will go and hit, you are giving the initiative to the terrorists, and we don't know who these terrorists are. We have alleged that they are coming from Pakistan, but we still don't know who these chaps who came into Pahalgam are. And tomorrow you could have another attack in other parts of the country. After all, they came from across the sea to Mumbai in 2008. If we lock ourselves into this, strategy that you hit me, I will hit you back, then we are getting into a spiral of destabilization of the subcontinent. And I don't think that's in the long term the right strategy.
Right.
In the long term, we need a strategy that stabilizes the subcontinent. Now, what is that strategy? It's for people in government to think about. What is it that you
But
would do?
the fact, if I may, the fact is over the last 3 decades, we've not been able to find that strategy
No,
with
that's
Pakistan in
that's not the
particular.
point, Rajdeep. Let me finish. I mean, yes, we have tried one strategy in the past that didn't work. We are trying another strategy now. It may or may not work. But I do think there are serious issues. There are serious issues about what exactly is the final solution. Now,
And
what
then
is the final solution?
let me
Is the
take that.
occupation, 1 minute, is the occupation
Yes.
of POK the final solution? After all, the Indian Parliament has said that, Amit Shah has said that, we will go and take back POK. Is that the final solution? Is that what the international community will support us on? Of course not. And we have had an issue this time that world opinion is not fully convinced about the strategy we have adopted. So there are issues. I'm not
Can I?
criticizing the government for doing what they did. After all, they have more information than all of us. But going forward, will this strategy be a stable strategy, or will it destabilize the subcontinent? That's the concern I have.
I take your point, and I think you raise a valid concern that I want you, Kaval Sibal, to address. Michael, I'll come to you in a moment. Kaval Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, joining us. Sanjay Baru is raising a concern. Yes, Modi doctrine, tough kinetic action, but is there an end game? As we saw even with Operation Sindoor, suddenly, just as we had bombed Pakistan air bases, few hours later we had pulled out and agreed to an understanding with Pakistan. Is there a fear that this doctrine sounds very good, but how do you get off an escalatory spiral when you're dealing with Pakistan? How do you see the Prime Minister's speech, Mr. Sibal?
Well, I have not heard the speech, but I see on the takeaways that you are publishing just now.
Yes.
And I think it's a very tough message. And I see it as a message to Trump because Trump has, to my mind, unnecessarily gone out of his way to put pressure on India, of equating India and Pakistan politically, militarily, morally, trying to internationalize the Kashmir issue, offering mediation. And his line obviously will give incentive to Pakistan not to draw the right lessons from what has happened, as well as other partners of the United States. It is unfortunate.
But do you support?
I think Prime Minister has
Sir,
set the record straight.
But do you support the essence of the Modi doctrine that every act of terror will now effectively be seen as an act of war? That we will not just spare the terrorists, we will also strike against their sponsors. So we will go into air bases in Pakistan, we will go into Bawalpur, Muridke. Do you support that, or do you believe this can lead to miscalculations?
No, I don't think that this is the meaning of what Prime Minister is saying. I mean, if it's a minor attack, let's say a chap from other parts of India is killed in Jammu and Kashmir, as it has happened, some local Kashmiris are killed. It depends on the nature, the size of the attack. And then we have to decide whether it is an attack that merits a strong response from us. True, it is a difficult proposition. Even if there's a small attack, you can't go and start bombing their bases, because then there is a big cost that everyone pays. But there'll now be a great inhibition on the part of Pakistan, unless, of course, we think that
You think this will deter Pakistan? You think this will deter Pakistan? You think this will deter Pakistan?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They must have also drawn the right lessons from what has happened, just as we are drawing some lessons that we should be very careful in not treating every act of terrorism as an act of war, and we have to take the longer term implications of this in view. Pakistan has to think twice, even more, in terms of provoking India.
Okay.
So there is a
do you
burden
agree
on
with that?
both sides.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Rubio, that this approach of a kinetic doctrine, some are likening it already in their reactions to what Israel does, hits at Gaza whenever there is any terror attack. Of course, what happened in October 2023 was of another level. Do you believe, Mr. Rubin, we can do that effectively, that we can actually have this kind of muscular doctrine that the Prime Minister has enunciated? Is that the way the world should deal with terror, Mr. Rubin?
I absolutely believe that's the way the world should be with terror. And then, at the very least, you claim the right to do this, and if you choose not to, that's something for down the road. But, look, terrorism is a cost-benefit analysis. That's why its sponsors embrace it as a tactic. You raise the cost, and it's going to cause some serious doubt. But in reality, is it going to be enough to end the problem? Here's where I dispense with any moral equivalency. Look, the problem India faces, and for that matter, the world faces, is only going to end when Pakistan fundamentally reforms its the mess that its state has become. It's only going to fundamentally abandon terrorism when civilians gain true control and the military is put back in its place. You know, there's been two recent conflicts, one between Russia and Ukraine, and the Russian army hasn't been held accountable internally in terms of reforms and so forth for its corruption and its miscalculation. Then there was the Azerbaijan-Armenia war of 2020, where the Armenian military lost badly, and the defense minister, for all of his miscalculations and alleged corruption, today is in prison in Armenia. The question now in Islamabad is whether Asim Munir is going to be held accountable. But ultimately, peace and stability will only come when the Pakistanis hold themselves accountable rather than try to distract the world and their own public by continuing sponsoring terrorism and attacking India.
So let me just take that to you, that if tomorrow, God forbid, there is something similar to what happens in Pahalgam, and India decides, as the Modi doctrine says, that we're going to hit you back, will the US fully support us? Because in this particular three-day conflict, as we keep saying, they showed this equivalence. Will that change? And what you're saying, Prime Minister Modi now needs to speak to Donald Trump and wake him up to the reality. Am I right?
Ultimately, I think the United States will support India, but you're absolutely right. Prime Minister Modi and various diplomats, as well as members of President Trump's inner circle, need to give President Trump an education quickly and make him understand that he's actually making the situation worse by extending a lifeline to Pakistan.
Let me give a final word to you then, Kanwal Sibal. Do you believe that that is one of the challenges for India's diplomats, to go across the world and say that, particularly to Washington, that this equivalence, you've been a former ambassador there, that this equivalence will no longer do? Because if that equivalence is retained, then this entire Modi doctrine simply doesn't, simply won't be able to have that kind of impact it needs to have to get Pakistan to end sponsoring terror.
Well, frankly, I'm a bit puzzled and disappointed by the position that President Trump has taken. But then President Trump blows hot and cold. He doesn't focus on the complexities of the issues. He's whimsical, he's unpredictable. And what he's done can potentially do great damage to the trust building between India and the United States, because he's touching the raw nerves of India. And he's actually contradicting the basis, the core of Indian foreign policy when it comes to dealing with the Kashmir issue and with Pakistan. Huge error. We have people around him who understand the issues, and I hope they can influence him and educate him, as was rightly said, so that he doesn't put more and more his foot into his mouth. It's very unfortunate what he's doing, and he's putting us before a very, very difficult challenge at a time when we are committed to enlarging and deepening our relations with the United States, and things look pretty good after the visit of our Prime Minister there. So one is very perplexed as to why he has taken the position he has taken, even to the point of absurdly suggesting that I'll end trade with both countries if they don't agree on a permanent ceasefire. Okay. US trade with Pakistan is only $7 billion. With us, it's $200 billion. Is this a responsible politician speaking? Is it a responsible attitude of the President of the United States? I mean, it's very possible, but step back from it.
I'm going to end it here. I think all of you have made very strong points, which I hope someone, both in the White House and here, is listening to. Mr. Rubin, thank you very much. You were excellent, and you've given some very strong comments. We look forward to having you in the future. Sanjay Baru, Raj Chengappa, Kanwal Sibal, for giving us your initial comments. Of course, it will take time to digest this whole Modi doctrine, my word, not necessarily the Prime Minister's, the tough talk that he gave today. But terror and talks don't go together, neither do blood and water. I think those words will resonate. I appreciate my guests joining me.